On up, okay? So welcome everybody to our panel on this new form of conservatorship that's going to be implemented in San Francisco. It's also known as a housing conservatorship, or SB 1045 by the name of the legislation. Just as a housekeeping matter, we have note cards available if you'd like to write a question. And then if you have written a question and Victor will be walking around collecting them if you'd like to give them to him, and then we'll get questions asked as we have time. So I'd like to welcome our panelists today. Supervisor Rafael and Nancy represents District 8 on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Prior to his election, he was a deputy city attorney for the city of Oakland and an elected trustee on the City College Board. As a deputy city attorney, he practiced primarily in areas of real estate, economic development, and affordable housing. He was recently appointed to be the co-chair of the Meth Task Force with the mayor. He has a BA in history from Yale, a master's of public policy from Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government, and a law degree from UC Berkeley's Bolton Hall. And then we have Jessica Lehman, who serves as the executive director of San Francisco Senior Disability Action, an organization committed to mobilizing seniors and people with disabilities to fight for justice on healthcare, housing, transportation, and other issues. She led community coalitions that designed and secured funding for free muni for seniors and people with disabilities, and support at home, the San Francisco Home Care Subsidy Program. She is a founding board member of Hand in Hand, the Domestic Employers Network, and leads the National Disability Leadership Alliance's Organizers Forum. Next, we have Jennifer Friedenbach. She is currently the executive director on the Coalition on Homelessness in San Francisco. She has worked for the coalition for 23 years as the executive director, as organizing director, substance abuse and mental health work group coordinator, and fundraiser. Previous to coming to San Francisco, Jennifer was the director of the Hunger and Homeless Action Coalition of San Mateo County. And then to her right is Rachel Rodriguez, who is a licensed clinical social worker who has been working in a variety of settings in San Francisco over the past 16 years. In 2011, she co-founded Community Payee Partnership, a nonprofit located in the Tenderloin, and who partners closely with the SF Homeless Outreach Team and the UCSF Citywide Clinic. CPP provides representative payee services to approximately 250 individuals who have severe mental illness, substance use disorders, and may currently or formerly experiencing homelessness. She concurrently has been working as a social worker on the inpatient acute psychiatric unit at St. Francis for the past 11 years, a position which has included representing the psychiatrists at twice weekly 5250 and 5270 probable cause hearings, which goes into the Welfare and Institutions Code. And then last but not least, we have Kelly Kruger, who is a sergeant in the San Francisco Police Department. She has been a police officer for 18 years, and 14 of those years she has been with the psychiatric liaison unit. So welcome to all of our panelists. So as you can see, we have a very rich in knowledge panel. And unfortunately, one of these rich in knowledge people may have to leave sometime during our program. So I'd like to spend the first maybe 10 minutes or so with Supervisor Vandelman, and just, can you give us a brief overview about why SB 1045 or housing conservatorship is something, in your view, is necessary in San Francisco?
Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. I want to preface this by saying that it is not an easy or happy thing for me to be disagreeing with Coalition on Homelessness or Senior Disability Action, two organizations for which I have enormous respect and generally agree with on almost everything. But 1045, and I think maybe conservatorships more broadly, are an issue about which I think we have disagreement. And I guess to sort of set expectations, there's been a lot of talk about 1045 and conservatorships as by some of the proponents as a solution to homelessness. And I think it is really important in sort of setting the table for the conversation to understand that neither SB 1045 nor conservatorships are a solution to homelessness. Homelessness is a problem relating to the lack of a home for someone who needs one, and that is, the coalition, I think, has been one of the most effective, maybe the only strong advocate in San Francisco around getting housing for people who do not have them and need them. But I do think that conservatorships have an important role to play in addressing mental illness. And it is an issue that is personal and personally important for me as someone whose mother suffered from mental illness for most of her life. I did have a conservatorship over her for a portion of that time. But of course it is also related, although conservatorships are not a solution to homelessness, or at least alone they are not. There is a significant portion of the homeless population in San Francisco right now that does suffer from mental illness and severe substance use disorder, and that is a problem I think all of us are acutely aware of and see. So, SB 1045, I think to understand SB 1045, it's useful to contextualize it in the broader sort of what conservatorships are and how they sort of started. And I think everybody, or most everybody, knows that this country has a very unproud, bad history of institutionalizing far more people than we should. And so if we go back 50, 60 years into our history, we see people being locked up in institutions for some who may have needed to be at a level of care that required hospitalization, but many who were just different or gay or very difficult. Various reasons people were hospitalized and institutionalized for long periods of time. And so recognizing that we had gone way too far in that direction, and sort of in the aftermath of things like books like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, there was a movement to de-institutionalize people. And in California, the expression of that was the Lanterman Short Act, which spelled out sort of a balancing of when we would take away what conditions would trigger us to be able to take away people's rights and care for them without their consent. And so many of you may have heard of 5150s and 5250s and conservatorships. Lanterman Petrus Short basically sets a test, which has been the test for about 50, 60 years, of is the person a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or are they gravely disabled? If they are not those things, you cannot hold them. You cannot hold them for 3 days. You cannot hold them for 14 days. You cannot hold them on a longer term basis through a conservatorship. But if they are those things, then you can, by petitioning a court, petition for a traditional LPS conservatorship. Now, for families of people with mental illness, LPS has been frustrating, I don't know if since its inception, but for a long time. Because what constitutes grave disability is sort of in the eye of the beholder. And many, many people who I think a majority of us would think need some outside assistance coming into their lives and taking care of them may not meet a particular judge's understanding of what grave disability means. And so that's been kind of an issue for a long time. And there have been many who have wanted to try to think a little bit more clearly about grave disability and applying either applying LPS differently or expanding or more clearly stating what types of behaviors or illnesses might trigger someone being appropriate for conservatorship. But there's another problem, which has become increasingly acute in San Francisco, which is folks who may suffer from a mental illness, but who are also serious drug users, and who are in a cycle, many of whom are homeless, which takes them from the street to the emergency room to jail, who are being taken in on a 3-day hold, that is a 5150, frequently, many, many times. But because a significant component of their illness is their substance use disorder, within a few days or even hours of being in the hospital, the basis for holding them under a traditional LPS concept kind of goes away. Well, 14 hours later, 18 hours later, they're not showing the same symptoms that got them 5150. You can't admit them into a hospital for a longer term stay because you don't, against their will, because they don't in that moment meet the test, and so they're back out on the street. But this can repeat itself over and over, so that that person is spending a lot of time, again, in jail, in the hospital, but we're never actually able to get a handle on them, to get them into a longer term drug treatment program, to basically give them some kind of timeout. That problem, I believe, was what led San Francisco's Department of Public Health and the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing to work with Senator Wiener on SB 1045, which was aimed at that population to try to create a new basis for conservatorship that would allow for conservatorships of up to a year for this population. It would still require a judge. The person who's being conserved would still have a public defender. But again, to get a conservatorship over someone who's showing by a pattern of behavior over time that they can't take care of themselves, but who in any particular moment after having been stabilized in a hospital wouldn't meet the test in front of a judge. So that's what SB 1045 was supposed to do. Now, you can imagine that that would trigger a fair amount of concern and consternation among civil libertarians and advocates, and that is what happened in Sacramento. So in the process of working it through the legislature, Senator Wiener made a number of changes to SB 1045 that significantly narrowed its applicability. And so many of you may already know this, but the population now that could be appropriate for an SB 1045 conservatorship is limited to people who meet the following tests. They are both severely mentally ill with a diagnosis and serious substance users. They have a serious substance use disorder. They have also been 5150'd by the police 8 or more times in the last year. So both of these narrow you into an increasingly narrow population. That's intentional. Senator Wiener did not want to have this applied super broadly. He was trying to apply it to a relatively narrow population. So 8 5150s over the course of a year, particular population. But there's a third element that was put in and I'm done. Thank you.